would like at some point for both my adoptive family and my biological family to be able to like fully combine and kind of be as one family. I first started trying to find my birth family when I was living in Las Vegas. Living in that area definitely shaped a lot of my style and my personality. People first met me, they would always assume that I knew Spanish, and so a lot of the times when I didn't know that, people were surprised by that. When I was growing up, I never had to be told that I was adopted because I remember the adoption process. I remember, going to visits with my mom when I was young and stuff. So there was never like a day that my parents had to sit down and kind of explain to me what it was. I always knew that I came from somewhere else and that I was different. I just didn't know in exactly what way. So yeah, I always knew, and I never cared to ask that many questions because it didn't really affect my life until I got older and started to like feel out of place. My parents could do everything they could to, raise me right and set me up, for life the best that they could, but they were never going to experience the world the same way that I do. And so I think there was a lot of times that I had things that affected me that my mom would never be able to understand because she has never been in those same positions. If I try to explain to my mom that I have to do something differently than the way that she would, or that, well, people might be more suspicious of me because of this, or explain to her that I got accused of stealing and none of my sisters did, like things like that I don't think she ever fully understood, because I think a lot of people may not have prejudice towards other people, so they just assume that maybe it's not a thing anymore, but it definitely very much is. It just doesn't affect everyone. And so I think there was a lot of times that I had things that affected me that my mom would never be able to understand because she has never been in those same positions. My parents never made that much of an effort to, make me more knowledgeable, like my own culture, my background. I think it was just something that was kind of unknown for them, so they kind of left it at that. I did get a quinceañera when I was 15. However, that was because it was part of the agreement in my adoption, was that when I turned 15, they had to throw me a quinceañera. So I don't think that's something that they would have just done on their own or even known what it was. I mean, the entire time my mom was calling it a quinceañero. So I don't think that that's something they would come up with on their own. That I asked to get enrolled in Spanish classes or get, things like that, or cooking classes even. And I was told, maybe sometime in the future, but it kind of never came around. I went through my mom's filing cabinet and found any files that mentioned my name or my brothers or my parents. I combed through the stuff for months. I got birthdays and names and addresses, but a lot of the stuff was from 15 years before, so not everything was the same anymore. And my name had changed, so I was sure that it was possible that their names could have changed too. So it didn't really make any progress for a very long time. My best friend would help me look online and on social media. We didn't really make any progress until I was a senior, and I was able to find a public court record that showed that my grandmother remarried a few years back, and she now had a different last name. And so with that, I was able to find her on Facebook, and from there find my brothers, and I contacted them, kind of sent them a message just being like, this might sound weird, but do you have a sister that was adopted? I got a response from that, and then video called to kind of confirm what it was, and I met all three of my brothers and my mom and my grandma. It was definitely like mind-blowing to see their faces for the first time and to look at someone that had my eyes and someone else that had my smile, because that was something that had never happened to me before. My sisters had blonde hair and blue eyes, and it was always very obvious that we were not biologically related. I actually never lived with my biological family because I was taken from my mom at birth. My mom had started to use drugs while she was pregnant with me, so that meant that when I was born, I began to go through withdrawals. So I was in the hospital. I was born extremely early and extremely small, and I was in the hospital for a few months before, in the NICU, before I was able to go home. My dad wasn't a citizen, so even though he hadn't done anything to lose custodial rights, he essentially had none to begin with because he was not a citizen. And so my parents tried to get married to, get him citizenship to keep me, but that didn't work. I was in foster care because we had been displaced out of my mother's home, which was that I was never up for adoption. I was always foster to return, which meant that there was a plan in place through the court that had been agreed upon between them and my mom, and that kind of laid out what steps were needed in order for her to regain custody. Anyways, I come to find out that my mom she tried over and over and over again. She was rejected to adopt me, actually, because I was supposed to be fostered to return. But she ended up, getting a lawyer and doing everything she could to get me, which, obviously feels nice to a certain extent because someone wants me enough to go to that, those extreme lengths in order to have me be a part of their life. But at the same time, it was ripping up someone else's daughter away from their family who was maybe less fortunate and who wasn't going to have the same chance in the system. I love my mom and she's done so much for me, but at the same time, this is the same person who caused so much distress and sorrow to my biological family, who was also very important to me, and I love both of them equally. So it definitely has caused issues in that sense. I was told that pictures and letters of me were forwarded to her and mailed to her for a long time, but that she had said that she didn't want to receive that anymore. So for a long time, I felt kind of a sort of resentment and anger towards my biological mom for cutting that off, because I felt unwanted. I felt like I wasn't worth fighting for. As I got into contact with them and I got older, I then found out that my mother never asked to stop being sent photos and letters or to stop visiting. She was actually told by the social worker that we were moving to California and, that we wouldn't be nearby, and they completely fell out of contact. And so 15 years went by with no contact. I was actually told that my dad was living in Mexico. Come to find out that until I was 11 years old, I was, living just 10 minutes away from them the whole time. And I hadn't seen them since I was 5. So, up until that point, I could have been building a relationship or been in contact, but I wasn't. There's kind of a fear in the back of your head that when you do finally find them, or if you do finally find them, that they won't want anything to do with you. And I think that was the scariest part. I think that was the hardest part, was the anticipation, not knowing. So there definitely were times where I was put in a position where I felt like I had to choose between one family or the other. And that was definitely a struggle. I have to make a choice, right, on Christmas. Which house am I going to be at? Who am I going to be spending that with? This also means when I'm in a relationship that's 3 families that I have to, split that time between. And so I think my life would be a lot easier if they would. But I'm also, I want to respect everyone's boundaries and let things happen at their own time. I don't want to force anything. It's definitely a goal of mine to have that kind of blended family in the future, but we'll see what happens.